Hello, it's absolutely thrilled to have Sarah Templeton here. She's been at prior conferences. She's an absolute stalwart of the ADHD community. She's doing extraordinary work at ADHD Liberty, which is the #1 ADHD charity in the UK working in the criminal justice system, and is like, there's working in, there's the next level, which is pioneering work in, which is her, and it's she is breaking her holiday to speak to us. And for which we are, as ever, eternally grateful. And welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Hello from sunny Tenerife.
I mean, the big question is, which is always a pretty big answer, what have you been up to? Like, what's been happening?
Oh, Henry, what have you been up to? Okay, I'll bullet point it, and then we can go into more detail of what you'd like to know. We're now arranging ADHD assessments direct into prisons. We're doing that a lot. We're doing it for parents. We're doing it for probation. Actually, have even paid us to do assessments. We're doing it for partners and all sorts of people. And some of the clients actually in prison themselves are paying for their own ADHD and very often ASD assessments as well, because they're so fed up waiting for the prisons who are basically misdiagnosing them, or worse, not diagnosing them. I don't know what's worse, actually, miss or not, but they're either getting diagnosed with personality disorders or nothing. So we now have several psychiatrists. They're all ex-prison service, and they are now doing assessments direct into prisons. That's a large amount of my job now. What I do is arrange these assessments. A lot of them are before court. So these people inside know they've got these conditions, but they can't get them diagnosed, and they need them diagnosed before they go to court. So we're doing a lot of that. The other thing we're doing tons of is work with the police. Full credit to the police here in the UK and also Australia. I'll talk to you about that as well. But we're now working with, I think it's about 36 police forces who are all going to start screening for ADHD in their police stations, and ideally catching people the first time rather than the 30th time they go into a police station. So we're working with people like Greater Manchester Police, West Midlands Police, Police Scotland, really, really big forces. And they're all going to start screening. So we're screening in different ways. Some people are screening through their L&D, liaison and diversion teams. Some are screening children. Police Scotland are screening everybody. Police Scotland have got the highest suicide rate in Europe, and they think that is largely down to undiagnosed ADHD. So that's why they're starting to screen everybody in Police Scotland. So we're working with the police, setting up pilots. We're also setting up pilots with homeless organisations. I will tell you the two, the Big Issue and Crisis, which thrills me because I used to work for both of them or volunteer for both of them. I was years and years I worked with Crisis doing, I was hairdressing services manager first, then I was entertainment services manager, did all sorts of things for Crisis at Christmas. So Crisis are going to do a homeless pilot for us, which is amazing. And also the Big Issue. The Big Issue is where I started my helping career nearly 30 years ago. So the homeless world are starting to do pilots, and the addiction world. And when I say pilots, I'm talking ADHD screening pilots, because in the criminal justice system, the addiction world and the homeless world, there's a huge crossover. Most of the people in there have experienced 1, 2 or 3 of those sort of areas, i.e. most prisoners come out and are homeless. A lot of prisoners come out and have got addiction issues. So we're doing pilots in all these different areas to try and prove to the government one thing. And that one thing is that ADHD screening needs to be mandatory in all these services, particularly in the criminal justice system, because people are going back to prison time after time after time after time because they've got undiagnosed ADHD, and they are costing the government a fortune. Whereas the people that we are getting screened through the charity and diagnosed and medicated, they never offend again. There's a surprise. They're all out, they're working, they're earning money, and they're doing brilliantly. So that's primarily what I've been up to. I'm also just writing my 4th book, which is going to be about my experience in the prisons and how much ADHD was in the prisons, which is off the scale. And the one thing I will say before I shut up is that the 1 in 4 figure really needs to be put in the dustbin now. The 1 in 4 figure is utterly irrelevant. It is not 1 in 4 people in prison who have ADHD. It is more like 85%. All our pilots, trials, screening, everything is coming out either at 85% or slightly over. I missed out probation in there, by the way. Sorry, we're working with several probations and they are starting to screen as well. And they are all, well, the ADHD probation officers themselves are not surprised that it's coming out so high because they recognize it in all their clients. But the people who are not ADHD probation officers, when they're screening, they're saying, we can't believe this. It's nearly all of them. And we're like, yeah, we've been telling you this for years, but nobody's been listening. But now, thankfully, people are listening. So probation is another organisation that we're passionate about working with. So if there's any probation officers listening to this, please get in touch with us. We can set you up screening. Doesn't cost a penny. And it's not only going to stop the offender offending again, it's going to make the probation officer's job easy. Because they're not then constantly worrying, oh God, is he going to get recalled? Is he going to go and punch a police officer again? No, because once they're diagnosed and medicated, the vast majority don't commit crime ever again. So we're trying to make probation officers' lives easier by offering them screening. And the ones we're working with are all wonderful, but they are all very shocked because the probation screening pilots are coming out at well over 85%. As I have said since I left the prison system in 2016, it's pretty much all of them. And it is pretty much all of them. So that's what I'm doing, Henry.
And as I said, it's always a lot. And writing the book as well, the fourth. Look, we talk about ADHD and we see people falling out of education, falling into crime. We have a massive problem about the lack of monitoring. So the fact that we don't in schools, we don't know how many ADHD kids there are. We don't know their outcomes. We don't know that they're falling out. We don't, have the numbers saying that this higher proportion is being excluded, but we know it from our own.
Well, can I just add into that list of things that we're doing? We go into schools a lot and train teachers. So I'm very passionate about training teachers, and we do it all over the place. In the UK, abroad, I went to Scotland, Aberdeen last year, training teachers. So training teachers is something we're very, very passionate about because we too are massively keen on stopping this school to prison pipeline, because the school to prison pipeline is chock-a-block with neurodiversity, primarily ADHD, but there are other things in there as well. There's definitely autism in there as well and other things. But yes, teachers is an area that we're massively passionate about. We go into a lot of schools, and I'll tell you the very interesting thing about that is I have had several Senko teachers who've come up to me at the end of the 2.5 hours it is usually training. One of them said these actual words. She said, Sarah, I've been a Senko for 20 years and I've had Senko training for 20 years. And everything that you've just told me in that 2.5 hours, she said, I didn't know any of that. And I said, dear God, what have they been teaching you in Senko training for 20 years that you didn't know any of what I've just told you? And she said, all they teach us about is hyperactivity and distraction and lack of focus and how to manage it. And that's all they teach. They don't teach anything about emotional dysregulation, the higher self-harm rates, the higher suicide rates. They don't teach any of the important stuff to these Senko teachers. So when we go and train Senko teachers, they love it because they find out really what ADHD is. And they all of them, I mean, we've had them in tears, some of them. We've had them actually in tears who've said, I now can see years ago all the kids that I've missed, that I've told off for daydreaming, told off for doodling, told off for... one child I know of used to have his legs tied to the chair because he was so hyperactive. This is back in the 70s, 80s, but he used to have his legs tied with rope to the chair to keep him sitting down in school, and some of these teachers, well, all of them, all the ones that we train, once we've shown them exactly what ADHD is and how to manage it and how to speak to an ADHD person. And it's not difficult. Once you understand how an ADHD brain works and we teach them how to interact with it to get the best out of an ADHD child, they're all like, it's not rocket science, is it? It's not hard, but nobody's told us this stuff. So yes, teaching teachers is a big passion of ours, and we're doing a lot of it.
It's obviously critically important, and there's a horrifying story about the tying to the chair, and it reminded me of the counsellors who were on camera debating the costs to that council for special educational provision and complaining that they didn't have these problems previously. Perhaps it was something in the water that I think it was little Willie it just needs to be told off, and it's,
just needs to be parented properly and brought up properly.
Yeah, and the reasons that clear reason, the reason that there weren't these problems before was because you were tying people to chairs, like you weren't understanding their true issue, and you in fact
and sending them out of the classroom. Or in my junior school, everybody that I now know was ADHD, when I look back to the 11 and 12-year-olds, they were all carted off to the special needs school, because of their behaviour. Had anybody understood that behaviour was, from what I can tell, all of them were ADHD, the ones I remember being carted off. One of them was a girl, and she told the deputy head to F off once in library. That was her gone off to the special school, And I, to be honest, I always say to people, I don't blame people for being ignorant, genuinely ignorant about ADHD, because at the time when that girl was carted off to the special school, I sat there thinking, oh, I would never tell the deputy head to F off, because I've been brought up properly. She obviously hasn't, and yet there was I sitting there with my moderate to severe ADHD, but just because I could manage mine and she couldn't manage hers, she gets carted off and I didn't. But I was as judgmental as the rest. I used to think, oh, these kids, for heaven's sake, don't they know how to behave? My mother, I always say I was more frightened of my mother than I was of any school. So I behaved at school because I knew if a message got sent home that I'd misbehaved at school, I would be in for it when I got home. So that's why I behaved. But yes, the ignorance, and I use the word in the proper sense of the sense of it, the ignorance has been shocking over the years. And tragically, I always say this to people, I failed my 12 plus 1975 because of undiagnosed dyscalculia, because of undiagnosed ADHD. Now, wouldn't it be great to say, but everything's changed now, we're recognizing ADHD, we're recognizing dyscalculia, no, we're not. Nothing's changed since 1975. Nothing. So teachers aren't being trained to spot ADHD. I was always told, you're really good at English, you're just not trying in maths. Just try harder, concentrate, focus, But it wasn't. It was because I had dyscalculia, but nobody had worked that out. And that's why I failed the 12 plus as well, because people with dyscalculia like me, when somebody asked them how many grapes and bananas and strawberries has Rory got, because Rosie's got 3, 8 and 10 of each, my brain goes, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Not interested in Rosie and her apples. I don't care. So that's dyscalculia. I didn't realise until I was in my 50s. That was why I failed my 12 plus. Now, are kids being picked up for dyscalculia in schools now? No, not a chance.
Out of interest, what was your opinion on Rishi Sunak's plan that everyone take A-level maths?
I think that's absolutely fine unless you've got dyscalculia. So if you are going to lay down laws like that, fine. As long as you're screening kids for all these conditions and you've worked out which ones can easily do that. I mean, I got A's in my English O levels and U in my maths. There's a surprise. Yeah. I mean, one of the indicators of ADHD is wildly differing grades. A for English, ungraded for maths, and nobody thought to look and think, hello, what's wrong there? But as I say, this was 1975. It's no different now. This is what drives us insane. It's no different.
Yeah, you were talking about the Senkos earlier. I did a spot on LBC, and this in that case, which is quite common. The sort of presenter who doesn't believe, and I always know I've won when they go, "Oh, this is something I need to learn a lot more about." And
I've got it myself usually.
Yeah, not for that one. But then the calls, I stayed on for the hour, and the calls were the first 3 calls were all Senkos, all of whom had learnt they'd had ADHD not through their Senko training, but through when their own child received a diagnosis, and then for the first time they really learnt what it was, and then they went, well, that's me.
That same Senko that said to me, I've just learned in 2.5 hours what I haven't learned in the last 20 years Senko training. She also said to me, she said, by the way, I've got dyslexia in 2 of my girls. Now, I say everybody with dyslexia has got ADHD. I have yet to meet somebody with dyslexia who doesn't. So I always say this in my presentations, bring me that person with dyslexia who doesn't have ADHD. There's a prize waiting when we find that.
I can't talk to that. I don't have the stats, but I do know that there was a recent study, I believe, from a university in Scotland, showing some genetic ties between dyslexia and ADHD.
Massive.
And so
And there's
the
also a
first part of
massive
that
connection.
exploration.
There's a massive connection between ADHD and the Celts, and I include the Irish and the Scots in that. Massive. So, but that lady, what she said to me at the end of the chat, she said, not only have I realized, 2.5 hours later, I now know what I can go back to my school and actually interact with the ADHD kids, because I now know about it and I didn't before. But she also said, I've got dyslexia, so have my 2 daughters. Thank you very much. I've just realized we've all got ADHD as well. So she was a Senko who knew she had dyslexia, but didn't know she had ADHD. And she's been a Senko for 20 years working with these kids, and she didn't even know she got ADHD herself. I mean, what hope is there? It's raising awareness. Yes, we all have to do it, and we have to keep doing it big time, because there's so much genuine ignorance around.
And this is obviously, this is ADHD Awareness Month. That's why we're doing this. And I have to say, like, you do sort of look at Awareness Month and go, we do this every other month also.
Every day, Henry. I do it every single day.
Yeah. Me both, obviously.
I spend my life doing it, and I'm passionate about doing it. I've done it here in Tenerife. The receptionist, he said, what are you here for? I said, I'm here to write my 4th book. He said, on what? ADHD? He went, oh, I think I've got that. I said, do you? 5 minutes later, yes, we know he's got that. It's everywhere. Even coming in the taxi. This is fascinating. On the taxi.
Well, we are a big group of people, right? Like,
massive.
In the UK, it's 2.6 million.
Taxi
one in
yesterday
20.
to Gatwick. Yeah. Lovely taxi man tells me that his daughter is diagnosed ADHD. I said, okay. I said, where did that come from then? You or a mum? He said, it's not me. I said, well, let me tell you some of the traits. Reeled off a load of the traits. It's his wife screaming. He said, she spends all my money. She's a shopaholic. The house is full of rubbish that we don't need. I said, it's your wife. And then he started to talk about his grandson. About his sensory issues. He won't hardly eat anything. He won't do this, won't do that. I said, it's your grandson as well. See, even him with a diagnosed daughter, who I think is about 30 now, he did not realize that it's hereditary. So he didn't even think to look at him or his wife or his grandson. So there was 2 that I not diagnosed, but recognized, flagged up in the taxi on the way to the airport yesterday, and the receptionist as soon as I get here. But these people, they know they've got all these things going on in their heads and stuff, but they don't know what it is.
Now, look, you've obviously doing some good identification of ADHD in perception, taxi, but like the stuff you're doing in prisons is a big deal, and the screening is a big deal. And that's where you're looking to identify ADHD in people coming into the criminal justice system. They're being brought in by the police and doing the screening. And you've got the bottleneck of assessments. And so you said you're doing assessments in prisons. Who's paying for that?
As I say, lots of different people pay. So very often it's the partner. If it's an adult man, we've got one lady who's paid for her partner to be diagnosed. Lots of parents, mostly it's parents paying, because they know that they're. Sorry.
So this is a private assessment being done in the prison service.
I mean, we're doing all the donkey work. They actually pay the psychiatrist or psychologist or whoever to diagnose. We, as in the charity, we don't charge for arranging this. So it takes a lot. I spend all day, every day doing it, put it that way. But we don't charge for that bit. The only bit that gets charged for is the actual assessment. So largely it's parents who are paying. It's also partners. It's grandfathers. We've got a grandfather at the moment paying for one for his grandson. And also, on occasion, very rarely, but it has happened, probation. Because if probation have realised that somebody has got ADHD and that is why they keep re-offending, they will actually put their hand in their pocket and pay for an assessment. So we've had probation pay as well.
Now, people have some pretty challenging, if they're opting for medication with shared care to their GP, like that must be at a whole nother level in the prison service. How does that work?
Where do we start with that?
So that is a challenge, though.
Meds, yes, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's not ungettable over. Meds in prison, any meds have 10 times the value they would on the street. Yeah. So your concerta that you might be able to flog for £3 a pill. I don't know how much people flog them for. I've no idea. But let's say you flog it for £3. In prison, that'll be £30. So they have very, very high value in prison. Yeah. Now, but
the core is that people can get that medication.
They can. The problem is, let me give you a brilliant example, though, Henry. I had 2 of my boys who went into the same prison. Now, I won't mention the prison. I shall be discreet, but it's a prison in England. One of them went in on his medication. So he had his medication in his pack, you know, his little suitcase thing with him. The other one didn't, but they were both diagnosed by the same psychiatrist, both paid for by our charity. The one that was on meds was allowed to be kept on meds. The one that wasn't on meds, he's still in there, he's still in this prison. They will not medicate him, despite him showing them his diagnosis letter, and despite the psychiatrist ringing up the prison and saying to them, I diagnosed him, he's severely ADHD, please put him on medication. They won't. That's the problem with what's going on in the prisons. It's very, very inconsistent. I will say I hear there are some prisons that are very, very good, that are assessing, they are diagnosing, they're not getting it wrong and saying they've all got personality disorders, which is a big problem. But some of them are getting it right. They're actually diagnosing them with ADHD and they are medicating. That is rare. The vast majority are either not being assessed and diagnosed. We've got numerous boys asking for assessments in prisons, and prisons are now just saying, we don't do it. We can't diagnose, you know, we can't do it. We haven't got the staff, we haven't got the expertise, which is why we're having to do it on the outside. And then a lot of them, who was it said to me this week? Somebody said to me this week, I think it was a probation officer or a neurodiversity manager in a prison, one of the two. One of them said to me, you do know in this prison, as soon as they arrive, we take them off their ADHD meds. And I said, well, no, I don't, because every prison operates independently. They don't all work the same. This is what people get very wrong. So some prisons, you know, you'll turn up like my one boy did, and they will keep him on his meds. And they did for the whole 3 months he was in there. The other boy has been in for the best part of a year, can't get them to put him on meds, despite the psychiatrist ringing and saying, I diagnosed them both. You've got one on meds and one not. Put them both on. And they won't.
And what does that make you feel like? Look, you're doing pioneering work in screening to help identify people who've been missed in their school system or earlier, to get them that intervention that can be life-changing. And you're hearing that in the prison service is just saying no. How do you feel?
How does it make me feel, Henry? I'll tell you how it makes me feel. This is how it makes me feel. 2 weeks ago, I was at an inquest in Nottingham for one of my young offenders from Aylesbury when I worked there 10 years ago. And they would not put him on his medication. 2 prisons, not just one. I put safeguarding risk letters into one prison and then safeguarding risk letters into the second prison. I'd done 5 in total for safeguarding risk letters. And each one on the top in bright red letters, it had safeguarding risk due to not being on the right ADHD medication. And 3 weeks ago, I was at his inquest, Henry, because he hung himself. And about 3 years before that, he'd set fire to himself because his emotional dysregulation was so bad. We had begged, we had pleaded, we had sent letters to the governors, to mental health, to psychologists, to psychiatrists, to the head of safer custody. Now, some people might not know what safer custody is. In a prison, safer custody are the people who are supposed to keep people in custody safe, i.e. alive. So we kept sending letters to safer custody saying he's a safeguarding risk, he's a safeguarding risk. Well, on March the 6th last year, he hung himself because he was so dysregulated. And if you ask me how it makes me feel 2 things in equal 50-50. One, extremely angry. And the other half of me is extremely sad because we are letting boys and girls, 5% of the prison population is girls. They're nearly all ADHD as well. But we are letting these people down and we are risking their lives by not medicating them in prison. Something I will just say, of the 2 boys I just talked about, the one that was kept on his meds in prison, this was his 16th visit to prison, age 29. And it was the only time he was put on enhanced. Now, that will only mean something to people who've worked in prisons. When you go into prison, you're on standard. If you're naughty, you get put down to basic. You lose your television, you lose visits, you lose canteen, you lose things. But if you're good, you get raised up and you get put onto enhanced. That means you get more visits, more time out of your cell, more minutes on your phone for phoning people. It means all sorts of little nice things. Well, the boy that was in there for the 16th time, and we'd got him diagnosed by our charity on the outside, so he was on his medication, he phoned me up one day and he went, Sarah, I'm on enhanced. I've never been on enhanced ever. Now, that was because every other time he wasn't diagnosed and medicated. So he was kicking off, punching people, thumping walls, ripping sinks off the wall, all these things they do just to pass the time because they're so bored. And he was staggered, this boy, that he was on enhanced for the first time. And I said, that is because of the meds. It's the med. He didn't understand it. He was like, why am I on enhanced? I said, it's because of the meds. Because you're not kicking off, love, are you? You're not ripping things up. You're not punching people. You're not telling people to F off. You're not getting into fights. So this is the other thing the prisoners don't realise. If you diagnose and medicate somebody, their behaviour improves. That makes prison officers safer. They are less likely to get stabbed or punched or kicked or whatever, because once we're on the meds and once these boys are on the meds, all the fight goes out of them. They're not bothered about fighting anymore. They're chilled, they're happy, and they don't want to get into trouble. They can stop the impulsivity, and the heightened sense of justice calms down. So by not diagnosing and medicating people for ADHD in prison, one of the things we're doing is putting officers more at risk, of an unmedicated ADHD person. We're also costing the government in this country and Australia, I'll come on to Australia in a minute, tens of millions of pounds if we would just diagnose these people, get the right diagnosis, get them medicated, get them out. That boy who'd been in prison 16 times before the age of 29, he's now been out for 4 years. He's on his meds, he's working, he's got a relationship, he's got children, and he says, I will never go back to prison again. And I believe him because he's now diagnosed and medicated. So this is the message we've got to get through to the government, that you're wasting so much money and you're putting officers and other offenders in prison at risk by not diagnosing and medicating those that have got ADHD. Simple as that.
You can hear, like, in your answers, like, you're trying to work out what are the levers to pull, because you're seeing people devastating, obviously, but they're taking people you've known taking their own life, and so I can hear you looking for everything you can to say, like, look, affecting prison officers, affecting the prisoners, like what are
it's also affecting the public, Henry. It's affecting the public, It affects the public, because if we don't diagnose and medicate people, they are going to be back out there getting drunk. This particular one, his problem was he was self-medicating his ADHD with alcohol. So when he was drunk, he got accused of fighting, a fray, punching people, blah, blah, blah. Now he doesn't touch alcohol because he doesn't need to, because he's on the meds and he doesn't need that self-medication anymore. And the public are safer. So it's the public that benefit as well. Everybody benefits by diagnosing and medicating offenders. Everybody benefits.
I think there's an important important point of the impact of ADHD, and in the prison service you're going to be seeing those people who have had very, very significant impacts from their ADHD, and one of the things I do think about ADHD is that it is a poverty making condition, like that it can push you into poverty and keep you, and because of the genetic aspects, it can keep your entire family there, like, and
100%.
And here we have reached the modern age where we have awareness of ADHD, we have tools that can make a difference, and yet we have in Sheffield, where they have over 6,000 people on the wait list, and last year they only saw 3 people. So they have an effective wait time of 2,000 plus years, and it's just here where I sit, you can't even join the ADHD list. They've closed it, and you're having to intervene where we talk about massive failures in schools, in prisons, and the commonality they have is that those are government-run institutions who are just abjectly failing the community of people with ADHD. They're failing other communities also, but they are failing us enormously, and they have the complete control. And we say an assessment can be life-changing, and who again controls the assessments? And it's them.
And absolutely. And I'll tell you something that completely feeds into what you've just said. Nearly every boy I've worked with in prisons, I've got nothing against girls, it's just I've only worked in 4 male prisons. All of them come from what was very obviously undiagnosed ADHD parents. And now most of the boys in prisons have either come from the care system, they've been removed from chaotic living houses. A lot of the boys in prison are very short. because they've not been fed properly as children. One of them, two brothers I work with, one was 5'7" and one was 5'4". And they were given injections in prison to strengthen their bones because their bones were so weak. Now, the reason for that, because I counselled the older one, was that the mother was an alcoholic and was dead by the time the one I was working with was 24. And the father had died before that. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict. Now, obviously, both ADHD undiagnosed. All the children from that family are all ADHD. So I can only assume that the parents are both ADHD as well. And then where did the two brothers end up? They end up in prison because their parents have gone. A lot of the people in prison, they don't have mums. That is the very, that's the commonality thing. Some of them have got dads, but that doesn't seem to matter. And a lot of them have got dads that have left years ago. They either don't know who their dad is or their dad's gone. But the mum, once the mum dies, and it's always from addiction, it's always from alcohol, it's nearly always alcohol. And these boys lose their parent around about 15, 16. That's a standard sort of age. And then after that, they don't think anybody cares about them. They don't think their life's worth living. So everything goes to pot. And then they end up in prison 17, 18. And then it's sadly the revolving door until they are diagnosed and medicated. Now, we are catching some of these in between. I'm having to force my way into some families who still don't believe in ADHD. And I'm like, excuse me, when you've been to prison 15 times, I think there might be ADHD there. So I force myself in. I meet these people in the most random places. A lot of people won't come to my therapy room, but they will meet me in the pub. So I meet people in pubs. And I have sessions in pubs trying to say, look, this is potentially where your offending behaviour is coming from. Have a chat with me and we'll work it out. So, yes, like you're saying, it is the big institutions that are failing people. The good news is, though, we're doing a lot of training in the care system, adoption services, fostering services. These sorts of people, they are starting to realise that they have a much higher ratio of ADHD than standardly. And that is, of course, because these children have been removed, usually from either chaotic living, neglect, alcoholic, drug addicts.
Yeah,
drug
and it's
dealers,
often it's ADHD and right, like so it's that
completely
of additional challenges and as well, like that can be. Now, look, we are overrunning on time, and you are in Tenerife. You are going to Australia. We've got a video that you've made to show people, so we're going to show that now. Then we'll talk briefly about what you're doing, and then we'll have to say goodbye. And we've managed to go over time, but because obviously what you're talking about is extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, can I just mention?
Hello. I have big news for our friends down under. More than any other country in the whole world, ever since I started writing books, this was the first one. This is the one that people got the hump about the title. Well, only certain people, boring people. Most people laughed and thought it was hysterical, including kids. So this one was the first book I wrote. Then I had loads of parents saying, please write one for teachers. So I did. This was the second book I wrote for teachers. And that one is selling all over the world, a little more gently, because obviously teachers they don't have the time, and a lot of them think they know about ADHD anyway, but parents are buying it for the teachers, which is fabulous. Then my final book has just come out. Well, I say final, no, this is the third of 7. I've got 7 that I want to write. This is the third one. So what I'm doing is I'm doing what the Australians have asked me to do. I'm coming to see you. I'm coming to Australia. I'm giving you plenty of notice. I'm coming in February and March 2025. I have a fabulous new American book publicist who is organising all this. So I will be coming to, wait for it, Adelaide, because I've had more requests from Adelaide than anywhere else, and Adelaide happens to be my favourite city in Australia. I'm also going to Melbourne, because again, love Melbourne and it's close. Then to good old Sydney, because one's got to go and see the Opera House again. And then I should be going up to the Gold Coast, not just to see Peter Andre, who might be hanging around, but because I love the Gold Coast. So I'm going to all those 4 places in Australia. So if you happen to be in any of those places and you have a school, your kids are at school or university or college or even work, if you want somebody to come and do training, somebody to come and do a presentation, I'm coming because you've asked me. You've begged. I've had people begging for about 4 years now. So I thought, sod it. I'm getting old. I'm going to come to Australia. So February and March 2025, I will be Down Under. And if you want me to come and talk at your school, or you've got teachers, or you've got parents, or you've got employers, or you've got anybody who doesn't understand about ADHD, and you want me to come and do a short, a long, a medium presentation with question and answer sessions, I will be doing it. I'll also be doing book signings in loads of shops, so there'll be loads of books to buy. And I really look forward to seeing you down in Australia, as they say it, in February and March 2025. See you.
There we go. We're back. Hello.
Okay.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I cut you off.
That's okay.
So tell us quickly. We have overrun on time. So tell us quickly about Australia, what you're doing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to Australia for 2 months, as you probably just saw. Largely because a lot of mums have asked me to. So a lot of mums who read my books, they say, if you think things are bad in the UK, Sarah, please God, come to Australia. Now in Australia,
we're talking, obviously we've got this is in partnership with ADHD Australia. So
exactly. So they probably know all about it. So I've said, I've been for about 4 years, mums have been saying, please come to Australia, please come and talk to our teachers, please come. And it started off as a book tour, but it's actually turning out really to be a criminal justice system tour, because we've had Queensland Police, we've had Melbourne Police, we've had several police forces contact us, and they're very, very interested in screening, because obviously they've got the same problem here. We've also had people in America contact us, but they've said it's going to be a much more difficult job in America because we're much tougher on crime. However, in Australia, they're very interested in starting to screen. So I want to go and talk to as many probations, as many police forces, anybody who will talk to me about why this is critical and how it will change their entire criminal justice system. So I'm going to be there for 2 months. And I just welcome anybody to get in touch, and please let me come and talk or give training presentations or Q&A sessions, whatever. But either teachers or the criminal justice system, that's what I'm going there to hopefully help the ADHD awareness along.
You're amazing. Look, and obviously everyone's seen the passion with which you talk. They know they're getting something very special if they get you in. So we've got to part company because we're out of time. We were out of time a little while ago. But hey, you are an absolute force of nature. Like, you are creating change in an area of such import. It's it is revolutionizing.
Because I care about them, Henry. I care about them. They're the top of my list. Offenders, people stuck in prison because of their undiagnosed ADHD. They're the very, very top of my list, and they're not top of many people's list, but they're top of mine. And I won't stop until they're all getting screened, assessed, diagnosed, and medicated in prison. Then I'll stop, but I won't stop till then.
It's people getting the support they should be getting. Again, when we're talking about trying to change reoffending rates, we don't understand what went wrong before, and try. You have this sort of beacon of this is an intervention point that can make an enormous difference, and just
we're doing it, we're proving it. We're proving it with loads of police forces, probations. We're proving it. There's no question most offenders have got ADHD. There's no question. We've just got to sort that problem out now, which we are doing.
Right, you started this conversation by saying, come on, let's get on with this. I have a sunbed with my name on it that I need to go to.
I do. And a book to write, more importantly, a book to write about the amount of ADHD in prisons. That's what I'm doing now.
So we're going to let you get back to both. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, thank you for your work. You are incredible. What you're doing is something else so important.
Well, I don't feel incredible. I just feel it's a big job. And, if anybody's going to change it, it's going to be me, because I care about them. And I will I will change this system. I will.
You and I share the same, that we're here to make a difference. And
yeah, totally. I will. And thank you so much for having me.
No, well, thank you for being a part of it. It's
Pleasure.
A big deal, and absolutely wonderful. And right, we have to say goodbye. Goodbye.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye.
And that's the end of this segment. I'm going to hand you over to the next one.